Hey fellas, how's it going? Welcome back to BTM, to the Basketball Time Machine, the podcast with former NBA players about former NBA players. Before we get to today's guest, just a little reminder, if you want to hear more podcasts like this one, just make sure you hit that subscribe button so you always get notified once we upload a new podcast. All right, so let's go. Today's guest is not only a four-time NBA All-Star, but also a true NBA legend. Otis Birdsong, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Growing up, who was your favorite player?
Well, as you progress, as you get older, your favorite players change. But when I was younger, it was Pete Maravich.
Wow.
And then when I got into high school and college, it was Walt Frazier. And that's why I wore the number 10.
All right. Pistol Pete was one of the most amazing players back in the days. What was the thing that you liked the most about him? Was it his creativity or what was it?
Well, of course, it was his creativity, but the way he scored the basketball, the way he dribbled and passed, and he was just phenomenal. I mean, people don't talk about how great he was to average 40 points a game for your college career, 4 years without a three-point line is just truly amazing. And he continued that when he went pro. The things he was able to do with the basketball was just unbelievable. I mean, I haven't seen a player to this day do the things that he was able to do. So he was just a phenomenal player.
Did you ever meet him?
I played against him several years, of course. And
did you tell him?
No, I didn't tell him. I had my hands full with trying to guard him. The only saving grace was he wasn't a great defensive player, so it was kind of easy to score on him.
Okay. When did you realize that you could make it to the NBA? Was there like a key moment, or did it just happen in the process?
Well, when you're in college having a good time and just playing basketball for the love of the game, I never really thought about the NBA. My first 2 years at the University of Houston, the Houston Rockets used to play in our facility because their arena hadn't been built yet. And I got to play against a lot of those players. And I think it was my junior year when I was playing against several of those players in the summertime that played for the Rockets. And not only was I holding my own, but I was doing very well against them. And that probably was the first time that the thought came to my mind that maybe someday I would be able to play in the NBA.
Who was the best college player you ever played against?
That's a pretty good question because my first 2 years at the University of Houston, we were independent. So we played against pretty much a lot of teams. I opened up my freshman year, my first game at the University of Houston was against the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. And they had Walter Davis and Mitch Kupchak. And, I played against Junior Bridgman when he was in college at Louisville. I played against Brian Winters and Alex English. I played against Paul Westball and Gus Williams when they were at Southern Cal, Marcus Johnson and Richard Washington at UCLA. So
wow,
it would be hard. I played against Robert Parrish when he was at Centenary. And, of course, the great Sidney Moncrief. We had battles and Vinnie Johnson with Baylor. So it would be hard for me to say who was the best player I ever played against in college.
Okay, but you played against plenty of good players. You were drafted in 1977. You were the second pick. Could you take me through the day of the draft? What was going through your mind? Just let me know how you felt.
Well, it was, I was really excited, first of all, to be participating in draft day. It was actually the first year that they were inviting players to come to New York. Of course, it wasn't the hoopla that it is today. And I knew I was going to be drafted number 2 by Kansas City because they told me they didn't want me to go to New York. They actually wanted me to be in Kansas City for the press conference. And so I was in Kansas City the day of the draft, so I knew I was going to be drafted. But I was more focused on getting back home after the draft because my mom had planned this big party at the house with a lot of friends and family members. So the draft was fun, but my mind was getting back home to be with family and friends and enjoy it with them.
All right. You had an incredible rookie season. You almost averaged like 16 points a game. When did you realize for yourself that, hey, I can compete against these guys and, hey, I'm one of the better players in that league?
Well, my rookie year was really, it was frustrating and it was tough. I didn't initially start at the beginning of the season. I actually started like midway through the season after about 40 games. And we had one of the worst records. I mean, we were 31-51 my rookie year. My rookie coach got fired, Phil Johnson, who went on to be an assistant coach at Utah for many years with Jerry Sloan. So even though as an individual I played pretty decent, it was really frustrating to lose 51 games, to finish in last place, not make the playoffs. It was frustrating. And so I don't have a lot of fun memories of my rookie year, just learning and being taught by the veterans. And it was a struggle. I mean, it was really frustrating. But I really worked hard in the off season and came back and made the All-Star team in my second year.
All right, so in hindsight, do you think it was good that you actually had to fight for your minutes and you had to earn your spot, or you rather have it vice versa and you would have played from right in the beginning?
No, it was good. And unlike today, when these players come out heralded, because they're on television all the time. So in the eyesight of most people, they're great just because they see them on TV all the time. Back when I played, just because you were the number pick in the draft, you were not guaranteed to start. We had a lot of rookies that didn't start initially that went in the first round because the competition was just so tough back then. I mean, you didn't have guys going hardship or coming from overseas. I mean, very few rookies made the team because it was just extremely tough. So I wouldn't change a thing. I was happy the way that my rookie year turned out because it made me really work hard in the off season and rededicate myself actually.
So you mentioned your second season already. You were just taking off. You had I think 22 points average, and you become an all-star for the first time. What was that feeling like, knowing that you are officially one of the best players in the entire league?
Actually, that feeling was better than being drafted.
Wow.
When you make an all-star team, especially back then, because the competition was so great. Now it's based on reputation, But back then, the competition to compete against guys, when you made the All-Star team back then, especially when the coaches put you on, it was a special feeling because a lot of times when fans vote, they vote for their favorite players. The teams that in the larger markets have a huge advantage like LA and New York. So when the coaches put you on from the conference, you deserve to be on the All-Star team because the coaches really know who are the best players. But it was a tremendous honor, and it was made possible because we got a new coach in Cotton Fitzsimmons the second year. Phil Ford, my backcourt partner, was Rookie of the Year that year, so he had a phenomenal year. And we turned it around and ended up making the playoffs. So it was just a great year as a whole.
Do you remember, were you excited playing with one of the elite players of the league, like guys you usually have to compete against? Now you actually have the chance to play with them?
Well, of course. Like Phil Ford, it was just a huge honor to be able to play with him coming out of North Carolina, 3-time All-American Player of the Year. And I had the same opportunity when I ended up going to New Jersey to play with the great Michael Ray Richardson. So it's always fun to play with guys that you had battles with and now you're able to play with. And I ended up with Boston, and to play with Larry Bird was fun as well.
You're actually just running through my list with all the questions, but good. You just mentioned Michael Ray Richardson. Could you do me a favor and explain how good that guy was? Because to me, it seems like in a conversation of the best players of the 80s, that guy always gets forgotten, even though he was a unique talent.
And that's the word I would use as well to describe him. He was so unique because at 6'6", I hadn't seen a guy that fast or quick. He was a great defensive player, had some of the quickest hands I ever saw in basketball, and fierce competitor, was afraid of nothing or no one, and just played hard all the time, never really worked out, never lifted weights, but he never got hurt. He could run all day, and he was a unique talent. I mean, there isn't a player in the NBA today that had a game like Michael had. I mean, to be able to do the things that he did at his size was phenomenal, and it was fun to play with.
Mm. Do you think if it wasn't for his, let's say, off-the-court demons, he would have been a Hall of Fame player?
No doubt. No doubt. Yep. I would have to say he was on both ends. I guess Gary Payton would be the closest player.
Defensively.
It's funny, I lost you for a second because we're talking about Michael Ray, and he was calling me.
No way.
Because, yeah, he and I are business partners, and we talk at least twice, 2-3 times a day. And so it's funny, he was calling right then.
Good to hear that he's doing all right. Actually, that is really nice to hear.
Yeah, he's been clean over 30 years, and I talk to him 2 or 3 times a year. We do free camps in the summertime around the country for underserved kids. We do like 8 camps, and he works with me, and he's doing great.
Great to hear. Throughout your entire career, you always had a great field goal percentage. Was there a secret you had? Did you work extra hard on your shot, or was it just natural talent? How do you manage to always have that high percentage?
I get that question all the time, and I have my roommate in college is an Italian guy, and he, we talk all the time also, and he reminds me of my senior year. I almost shot 58% from the field, and I think at the University of Houston, actually, I shot like 54% for my career, and of course 51 in the NBA. Long story short, nothing special. Of course, you have to practice and do all of that, but I tell people I came out the womb being able to shoot the basketball, and that's the truth. It was a gift. From the time I can remember when I was little, even though we grew up playing baseball and football in Florida, those were the 2 top sports. When I did play Little League basketball, when I started playing Little League basketball, I was the best shooter on the team. I mean, it was just a gift. You can't say you had practice when you're in Little League, when you're in the 3rd and 4th grade, to be able to shoot the basketball like that. And for as long as I can remember, I was always a terrific shooter. So it was a gift. And I don't care if people want to say, well, you got to work hard and work on it. No, it was a gift.
So starting with the 80s now, the Lakers Celtics dynasty is really taking off, and the 76ers, of course. What do you remember competing against Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and those incredible loaded teams?
Well, it wasn't just the teams for me, because the players you mentioned, like I played the 2 position. So I had to guard George Gervin and David Thompson and World B. Free and Paul Westphal and Dennis Johnson and Danny Ainge, and including Magic Johnson, had to guard Magic, and Byron Scott. And so that era of players, players like Ray Williams, who don't get a lot of credit for how great he was, Reggie Theus, who was a tremendous scorer. And of course, I had to guard Michael Jordan. So it wasn't just the teams. All of those teams were great, but they all had tremendous players. And you mentioned the 76ers. I had to guard Andrew Toney.
One of the most underrated players of all time.
It wasn't just enough going against those teams, and all of them were phenomenal teams, but I always had to guard the leading scorer on the team. And so, but it was a lot of fun. That's what I remember about playing against those great teams. It was a lot of fun competing, not just to try and beat them, but trying to slow down their top players.
Was there one specific player you just hated to guard?
Yeah, I mean, Pete Maravich was the guy that when I went into a game, I was like, man, not tonight. And Clyde Drexler, former University of Houston alum, Clyde was real tough to guard, especially because when he came into the league, I was kind of like on the downside of my career, at the end of my career. And it's tough guarding these young guns, man, when they're in their prime and you're like on your way out, but you still have to guard them. And Clyde was a load, man.
Was there a single player who you just loved to watch, even though you were competing against him?
No, not really. Back then, I was a huge Kareem Jabbar fan. And so he was always one of my favorite players to watch play, even at the All-Star games. When I went to the All-Star games, Kareem was the guy for me. You know, the other guys who I was competing against, I thought I was on their level. You know, in my mind, when I went on the floor, I always felt I was just as good as David Thompson or Gervin or any of them. But Kareem was just something special and something to watch, man. I just always enjoyed watching him play.
The next 2 years, you are an All-Star again, and in 1981, you play for the New Jersey Nets. But in your first season with the Nets, you only played 37 games. What happened? Were you injured?
Yeah, I had knee surgery my first year there. And actually, my 7 years in New Jersey was probably the toughest years of my basketball career on any level. Never really enjoyed playing there. I played for 5 coaches in 7 years. So that means there's 5 different systems, 5 different philosophies. Probably played with hundreds and hundreds of players because every week they were making trades and trades and trades. And our fans were terrible. They actually rooted, like when Boston and LA and those teams would come to town, the Sixers, we had sellout crowds, but the fans were yelling for the visiting teams. So the greatest thing that came out of playing in New Jersey was my relationship to this day with Michael Ray Richardson. He and I are very close, and we were close then. You know, even when he got kicked out the league and went overseas to play, he and I stayed in touch when a lot of people kind of disowned him and wouldn't associate with him. But New Jersey was 7 frustrating years. Even though I was able to make the All-Star team one year there, had nagging injuries. It just wasn't fun. And people ask me all the time, out of your 12 years, where was your favorite place to play? And I tell them it was Kansas City because we were like family on and off the court. And we had one goal in mind, and it was just a lot of fun to play in Kansas City.
How tough is it coming back after such a serious injury? Just like from the mindset, always having to motivate yourself to do all the things necessary to get back healthy. How did you manage it?
Well, it was tough, and the problem with me is that I didn't really need surgery. Come to find out, the doctor who was affiliated with the Nets at the time, he supposedly had perfected arthroscopic surgery. Well, come to find out, he was just operating on people even if they didn't need it. Kids, elderly, you would go into his office, he'd check your knee out. Oh yeah, I hear some creaking in there, cracking in there. We need to go in and check it out. And he was sued by a lot of people. And my knee was never the same. And I asked him, what did he find? He said, oh, we just removed some bone chips. But to this day, in fact, I went to the doctor yesterday for an x-ray, and I got to have an MRI on Friday because my knee is swollen, and my knee was never the same after that surgery. Throughout my career, it was never the same.
You just mentioned your All-Star game while you were playing for the Nets, especially in 1984. To me, that was like the peak of NBA superstars like Dominique Wilkins, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and so many Hall of Famers and legends. How proud are you that you made the All-Star team during that time period?
Well, I was proud that I made it at any time period because the era that I played in was the greatest time for NBA basketball. If you look at the 50 greatest of all time, over 75% of them played during that time, during that era that I played in. And I had the opportunity to play and know a lot of them. So anytime you can make an All-Star team, I will ask you to research this. Bob Lanier, the Hall of Famer, told me this one time. He said, Otis, if you find out how many players that have made one All-Star team, it will only be like 50 players all time or something, because the players make them multiple times over and over again. 200 players have not made the All-Star team in the NBA. With all the players that have played, 150 players haven't made the All-Star team. Check it out. Bob Lanier told me that, and I checked it out, and I counted them, and I was like, that is crazy. Not even 100 players have played in an All-Star game. Because you look at the teams like this year, Curry, Durant, LeBron, the same 20 players each year makes the All-Star team pretty much. You rarely have new guys making the All-Star team. And so he told me that, and it's like, if you can make one, it's really special to just make one. And you look at, Earl Monroe only played in 4. You know, you look at a lot of Hall of Famers and you think Calvin Murphy and these guys, you know, they didn't play in 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Very few guys get to play in 7, 8, 9, 10 All-Star games, you know.
You mentioned earlier that you ended your career with the Boston Celtics, so playing alongside Kevin McHale, Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, and all those legends. What was that experience like, finishing your career, with the Boston Celtics, with the Boston Celtics legends?
Well, they picked me up towards the end of the season and then on into the playoffs. And when I went for my physical, Red Auerbach came into the locker room, and he said, Otis, I just want you to know, if you wear the green jersey for 1 day, 1 hour, or 10 years, once you put it on, you're a Celtic for life. And that really made me feel good. And Larry Bird, he comes in after that, and he's like, he was hurt at the time. His back was hurt. It was the year his back was hurt. And he told me, he said, Otis, you know you're not going to win the championship if I don't play, don't you? I say, Larry, you're right. And Larry and I were friends because we had the same agent, Bob Wolf. But it was phenomenal, even though it was a short time playing in Boston. When you would go in the locker room after the game, the players were not fussing and fighting and reaching for stat sheets to see their stats. The only thing that mattered is if we won the game. You know, most teams you play for, the players can't wait to get in the locker room to look at their stats. In Boston, the only thing that mattered was if we won the game. And I said to myself when I retired, man, how much fun would it have been to play in Boston for my entire career?
Wow. I forgot one question earlier. Do you play with Daryl Dawkins?
Yes, very good friend. Darryl grew up in Orlando. I grew up in Winter Haven. I actually played against Darryl in high school. We've had an exhibition game. Darryl was a sophomore. I was a senior. He was at Orlando Evans. I was at Winter Haven High School, and we would play games against teams in the summertime, and he was huge. And the funniest guy I ever met, just crazy. The most talented player that I ever played with or against.
That would have been my next question. Did you feel that if Darryl would have taken things a little bit more serious, he would have been a different kind of player?
The most underachieving player in the history of not just the NBA, basketball.
Wow.
Darryl I've never seen a player his size jump the way he did, as strong as he was, could handle the ball like a guard, could shoot jumpers like a guard. He was phenomenal, but all he wanted to do was dunk. If Darryl had come out in this age with personal trainers, nutrition, and everything that these players have, he would have been a 20-year All-Star and a first-round Hall of Famer, no doubt. The most talented player, and I don't say that because he's passed on. I used to tell him all the time. And the year we beat Philly, when they were the defending champions, we upset them in the first round. We won the first 2 games in Philly. They won 2 in New Jersey, and then we go back and win the 5th game in Philly. The next round, we played Milwaukee. He totally destroys Bob Lanier. I mean, the best I've ever seen Darryl play. Totally destroyed it. And it's just a shame that he couldn't play that way his entire career, but what a talent, especially for his size.
Do you think he was still happy though with how his career
Oh,
turned out to
are you
be?
kidding? I've never seen a player more happy or happier than Daryl Dawkins. He was full of life, fun all day, every day, on the court, off the court. Even when he retired, when you saw him, he was making appearances, loved kids, loved people. People loved him. He was the life of the party and one of the nicest guys you ever meet, do anything for anyone. And he lived. I mean, he lived. Yes, he did.
Who's the most underrated player you ever played with?
I just told you, Daryl Dawkins.
He's also the most underrated player.
You mean underrated?
Yeah, not underachiever, but most underrated
player. Probably Sam Lacey. Even though he made one All-Star team, the things that Sam Lacey brought to the table night in and night out, his intensity, his desire, his passion, fierce defender, fierce rebounder, one of the best, if not, I would have to say he's the best passing center that I ever saw. I mean, he was phenomenal. So I would say Sam Lacey was probably the most underrated.
All right. We're almost done. 2 more questions. If you would have played in the 90s, what team would have been your team of choice?
Well, I retired in '89, so but the style today in today's game, any team, because especially Golden State, I like Golden State style in San Antonio because the way Popovich plays, the ball moves, and the person who's open take the shot, and that's the way I grew up. That's the way I learned basketball. You know, this coach told me one time, Otis, he said, the closer you are to the basket, the better chance you have of making the shot. So I always grew up taking high percentage shots. The game today is a game of threes. I don't enjoy watching it. I'm just being honest. I'm still affiliated with the NBA. Love being involved with the NBA, but it's hard to watch these kids in high school, college, and pros because the three-point line is just taking over the game. There is no mid-range shot. There is no inside game. You know, centers are a lost art. Even power forwards don't score and get the ball like they used to. So it's a jump shooting game, which I would have fit right in because I had a great jump shot, but it's just too much. I mean, I would put the ball on the floor. I would go in and try and dunk the basketball. You know, so these guys rarely drive. I mean, LeBron is big and he goes to the basket, but even he settles for too many three-point shots. So
you agree?
But to answer your question, I would say Golden State or San Antonio.
All right. So you agree today's NBA is hard to watch?
I don't watch a lot of NBA basketball. When the playoffs roll around, you know, I'm a Laker fan. I'm a LeBron James fan. So I watch more LeBron games than anything. But generally when he's not playing, I'm not watching basketball. I don't even watch a lot of college basketball. It's hard to watch. I mean, I grew up with learning the basic fundamentals, moving the basketball, the open man gets the ball, you know, setting screens, picks. Now it's just pick and roll, you shoot, pick and roll, I shoot, pull up on the break three-pointer. I mean, I watch more WNBA than NBA because it's pure basketball. You know, they have to move the basketball. You don't have one person just dominating the ball, dribble, shoot, go one-on-one. I mean, I grew up, if you dribbling the ball more than 2 or 3 seconds, you had it too long. But today, they just pound it in the floor and come, give me a pick, let me dribble and get it. It's hard to watch, man. I don't begrudge them for the money they're making. I'm happy for them. I'm happy that the game is doing so well because as a former player, when basketball does well, I do well. Any retired player should be benefiting from the advances and the hype and the joy that basketball is creating and exposure. We all benefit as basketball fans and former players.
Did you play with Purvis Short?
Played against Purvis Short. He would have to fall into one of the most underrated players ever also. I mean, you're talking about that high arcing shot, he could really score.
I just remember, I think he had like one season or 2 seasons where he almost averaged like 30 points a game. And nobody ever talked about this guy.
Yeah, it's just so many guys. That's why I don't have that discussion of who's the greatest ever. I don't have that discussion with anyone, because you can't pick out one player who's the greatest of all time. I mean, and when people have that argument or want to debate me, I was like, well, Bill Russell won 11 rings. Let's just start there. Why don't you start there?
All right, last question. Who's the player you wish you would have played with?
Probably Kareem.
Okay.
Because, of course you got to double the big fella every time, so you got to leave somebody open. I mean, Michael Cooper and Norm Nixon, those guys got a lot of wide open shots, man, from having to play with Kareem, because he was such a prolific scorer. And he was such a great passer. And I hear he was just a phenomenal teammate. So I would say Kareem.
All right. Otis Birdsong, thank you very much for being on the show.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. And since you are still involved with the NBA in a special way, I hope this is not the last time we're going to talk.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.